Hello, my name is Shawn Sidhu. I am an associate professor at the University of California, San Diego, where I serve as training director for our Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Fellowship Program. I'm also the associate medical director at Vista Hill, which is a community-based mental health organization that serves underserved and marginalized populations. I also work with the Southern Indian Health Council, where I get to treat Native American youth and their families. And that's about it. So I identify as a Sikh American. Sikhism is although it's the fifth largest religion in the world, it's a very, very kind of small group and oftentimes not necessarily well understood group. And the tenets of our faith really, it boils down to three things: helping the needy, working hard, and maintaining a spiritual connection. Those are the three tenets. And the thing that I love about child psychiatry is that I have a job where I don't have to choose between the values that I've been raised with and my job. I get to live my full identity as a Sikh and be a child psychiatrist, and the two support each other, which is really, I feel very blessed to have. I'm also a son, a brother, a husband, and a father. Very, very grateful for all of the communities that have welcomed me into their arms. When I was in high school, I went to work at Mother Teresa's Home of the Dying and Destitute in India, which had, I've experienced poverty in the United States. We have a long way to go. It was my first time seeing poverty at that scale. And so you're talking about just miles and miles and miles and miles of stretches of essentially homeless or transient people. So working in Mother Teresa's clinic, I saw, just really profound medical neglect, caste-based issues where people weren't treated because of the color of their skin or their last name or things of that nature. And I also got to work at an AIDS orphanage. So these were youth who had lost their parents due to AIDS. And so these experiences really, they really kind of shook me to my core. And I left thinking, what am I doing to help people who are in need, like these folks that I've been working with? And then in medical school, I got to work at a state psychiatric facility. And that was where the big light bulb went off about, wow, mental health really, really is so impactful that it can totally derail someone's life. And I thought back to all the times growing up where I would walk by someone on the street, and not even think another thing about it, not wonder who they were, what their name was, where they came from, what kind of hopes and dreams they had. I would just walk by them, and the light bulb went off that these are the invisible people in our society. They're unseen, they're unheard, and they have no voice. And at that moment, it was just, I was just sort of flooded with this feeling of gratitude to be able to work with this population. And I found that it was a spiritual calling. Some may say this is God's work. That might be too strong of a phrase to use, but it just felt like, wow. I mean, working with this population, what could be more fulfilling? And so that was what inspired me to be a psychiatrist. And then, in terms of child psychiatry, kids they're so fun. We get to be goofy, we get to be silly, we get to laugh in our work. We get to think about things at such a complex and multi-dimensional level, thinking about development, socioeconomic status, friendships, schools. And so I was always fascinated by that. And the amazing thing about child psychiatry is on one level, you get to really connect with this youth in a deep and profound way where they let you in to the point where you don't typically meet people in that kind of a deep way. But then you also get to treat not only their family, but there's this ripple effect of really impacting the entire community. And so many of these youth have come in with generations: systemic racism, adverse childhood experiences, intergeneration, multi-generational trauma. And it's just been going on forever. And you have this opportunity to push the brakes on that cycle. And then we start to see that post-traumatic stress turn into post-traumatic growth, turn into, all of a sudden there's a critical shift. And health starts to become a word in this kid's definition and this kid's dictionary. Health starts to become a word in this kid's dictionary. And it's amazing to see the kids and families then, they had everything they needed before, but they had so many barriers. And so just being able to help remove some of those barriers, and they take off how they would have otherwise. So long-winded and convoluted answer to your question, but that gets me excited about psychiatry. The first thing I would say is that if I could leave today's listeners with anything, it's ACAP is an amazing organization to get involved with because it really feels like family. I mean, I've always been treated very well. It's been welcoming. You walk up to people who you think in my mind, this person is so amazing, and they'll just get on your level and be like, hey, who are you? Where are you from? Let's talk about collaborating, and just they want to mentor you. So I would put in a plug for ACAP. At ACAP, I'm currently a counselor at large for the ACAP Council. I'm also a chair for the newly formed Clinical Essentials Committee, which we get to look at all the amazing educational content that ACAP offers and boil it down into some really, really nice courses. I'm also the co-chair of the annual review course, or Hanson Review course. And then in the past, I've been on the Training and Education Committee, the Program Committee, the Religion and Spirituality Committee, and the Assembly Executive Committee. Then at the APA, I've also been on the Council for Children, Adolescents, and Their Families. And I mean, I think there are some other small roles that I've had, but that sums it up for the most part. And this is the one where I didn't have as much time to kind of really think about it because I would have wanted to really think about a case. The truth is there's so many cases that really affect you that, I mean, it's almost overwhelming to think about just one. But I would say it's amazing how quickly youth develop a very strong bond with us. That's one of the things that's really striking about child psychiatry. Even youth who want to push us away because of trauma and not being able to trust adults, still, it's pretty quick. It's pretty amazing how quickly they develop that strong bond. After just a few short visits, they get so attached to us that if we're out sick or if someone else is covering for us, it's like, I mean, they really feel it and they tell us about it. And the other thing I love about this job is that the children and their families are so full of gratitude. I mean, to the point where sometimes I feel like I don't necessarily deserve all of the gratitude that they have, but they're just so deeply appreciative for what we do. Initially, I had a lot of insecurity and you could say a healthy or unhealthy dose of imposter syndrome. I mean, about my appearance, you can see I look a very specific way, and I had a lot of fear about how that might come across. Also, being the child of two immigrant parents, I've always had this fear about speaking English because growing up, it wasn't my parents' first language. And so the English that was spoken in our home was imperfect. And as a kid, I would oftentimes say things that made no sense to people and where the grammar was off. So, not looking like the rest of my colleagues and knowing that maybe I didn't have as strong of an English background as the rest of my colleagues, definitely there was a lot of fear that took away from really being able to be present in the moment. And, if I'm staffing with my attending, instead of just thinking about this case, it's like, am I going to say things correctly? What do they think about the way that I look? And so that's some of what I brought into the experience. And yet I had so many amazing mentors. And now that I look at it, having such an obvious outward appearance has actually helped in certain ways. When I meet a patient, when I meet a hospital administrator, or when I meet someone at ACAP, it's easier for them to remember you because, you may be the only person that they know who wears a turban. So now looking back on it, it actually was sort of a blessing in so many ways because it probably did create more opportunities. And professional organizations have been there for minority awards and being sponsored to attend certain things and receiving funding. And for that, I'm super grateful. Also, clinically, I had some of the same fears that, what will my patients think if I look a certain way? Will they not want to open up? And I've been pleasantly surprised that even if maybe there's a patient or their family who is taken aback when they first meet me. They're not quite sure what to make of me. By the end of the session, more than 99% of the time, they've really relaxed. And I think they can tell when you're just genuinely trying to help them. And I think they're really deeply appreciative, regardless of what you look like. So I've been fortunate in so many ways, but I did have to lean on some things, lean on some faith, some culture, some mentorship to kind of get through the initial insecurity and imposter syndrome. I remember the first mentor that I had that really stands out in my mind, and probably the greatest mentor that I've ever had. If I were to put it into one phrase, she saw something in me before I saw it in myself. So we go back to that insecurity and imposter syndrome. And sometimes we have the ceiling on what we think we can achieve in life. And she saw beyond that and really helped me to see beyond that. And that just knowing someone who I respected so much, really having that kind of faith in me, just dropped so much of this insecurity. It's just like a huge weight went off my shoulders, and I could really just sort of be and thrive. So, and I think, having a mentor that's the kind of person who you want to become, even if it's a little bit intimidating, is a great idea, because like I was saying, oftentimes we doubt how far we can come. We doubt how successful we can be, especially at a junior stage. And we don't see that the mentor we think is so amazing started off small, took a few baby steps, had some people help them out along the way. And you can ultimately get to that level. I would love for all my mentees to go beyond me. Like that's the goal. And I actually see them as being equals. And but really without that mentorship, I would have had so much untapped potential. I would have limited myself so much. So I'm incredibly grateful for the mentorship. Just number one, it goes back to the kids, bringing in fresh ideas and fresh things. I never knew about anime, and now all my patients are watching anime. Now I'm watching anime, and I'm learning about a different subculture. I'm sort of learning about a new language. And so kids are going to constantly be keeping us on our toes and making us aware of so many things that we weren't aware of previously. So that's a huge part of it. Working with families is incredibly gratifying. Most of these families, they were like the kid at one point in their life. So you're seeing this patient and you're thinking, what happened with their parents? And the parents will say, well, when I was raised, I went through all of this. And so you really, really get this sense of being able to help so many generations at once. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is the multi-generational effect of treating the kid and the family, and then the broader family is just, it's really, really hard to beat that as far as something that's gratifying. And then also just the complexity and how dynamic everything is with child cases is another thing that's really interesting. Yeah, I think in the beginning of training, it was a big thing that I was carrying around, and it was in my head a lot. It made it hard to learn. It made it hard to be present with patients and with attendings. There was a lot of this, like almost kind of like this feeling of a hierarchy, and I have to use certain words when I speak and act a certain way when I walk. And like there was just a lot of this. What should a doctor look like? What should a doctor sound like? What should a doctor act like? And I'm probably not any of those things. But the further and further I've gone along, the more and more comfortable I feel in my skin, probably because there's so much support around. ACAP is such a supportive community. You find work environments that are supportive. And, a lot of the kids and families have really been supportive of me as well. And so it feels really nice now. If there was anything I could do for our junior folks, it would be to go in and just be able to pluck out that imposter syndrome or that feeling of insecurity and just be like, you're good the way you are. You've made it this far. It's really hard to get to where you are right now. And for a lot of you, it's even harder than it is for most people. You might not have had family who went to college. You might not have had that much guidance. You might have had things happen in your life that were difficult throughout this whole process, because it's a long road. And yet you have all of the skills it takes. You're good, just as good as you are right now. And then of course, we all have something to work on every day. We can get better in every aspect of our life every day. but that doesn't mean that we're not good enough. We don't have the skill set that we need. And so, yeah, it's been really, really nice over time to just let some of that go and just be able to be present in the moment. As I kind of mentioned before, I think it was working with at the Mother Teresa Home for the Dying and Destitute at the AIDS orphanage that really kickstarted a lot of this. And then I think really it was that feeling of, this is what my faith has been instructing me to do this whole time. Really my faith has been instructing me to help people who are needy and, and to help people who are unseen and unheard and who don't have a voice in society. And throughout all of medicine, I never felt like there was a direct calling to that. Where with psychiatry, I felt like that was actually what I was doing. And the other fields of medicine were amazing. They were really intellectually stimulating. You could help people, but it felt like a secondary effect of that was sort of seeing them and hearing them. Where what I'm doing right now is primarily seeing them and hearing them. That's what feels so good about doing what we do. So I'm very excited about the future of psychiatry because of our young people. They are challenging us to be better in so many ways. We have to create a more diverse workforce that represents the communities that we serve. Too often, we're developing policies and procedures and creating task forces and committees without buy-in from the communities that we serve. Too often, we're doing research where we're coming across as, as the institution, we know all the answers and we're going to tell you what to do. And it's so infrequent that we're coming to a community and saying, hey, what questions do you have about your own community? And how can we help you answer those questions? But now there's an awareness about this, and it really is on this junior generation to help folks like me or mid-career, and people who are, maybe we're trained in a different way to change the way that we think about psychiatry. So I'm very excited. And I think the youth, they have this energy that's gonna really shift how all of us think about psychiatry. I'm always happy to be a mentor for you, whether you're in our program or not, whatever stage of training that you're in. You can always send me an email, and I'm always happy to work with you, or as a colleague, happy to collaborate and write. And ultimately work with you and learn with you and grow with you. So anytime you need anything, feel free to reach out.